And the Navy's standard is that the donated ships will undergo either a dry docking or some kind of major level of repair every 20 years.
I myself started out as just a person taking the tour because I was interested in the house, and I did, and I fell in love with the house. And the people there were so welcoming, and they started training me. The Latimer is one of my favorite houses simply because of its uniqueness. One of the unique things about the Latimer House is that it was in the Latimer family all the way up until 1963 when the Historical Society acquired the property, and we've been maintaining it ever since then and trying to keep it as original as it did look back in the 1800s and early 1900s. Because it was in the Latimer family for 3 generations, and the last 2 generations never had any children to leave the house to, a lot of the original belongings are still in that house. Original clothing, original furniture, just small little pieces that remind you of what it was like to live in that time period, in that Victorian era. Most of the houses that you go look at have very few of those old relics left unless they have been owned in the family for generations, which is very rare at this point. A lot of people love the furniture aspect because we have a bunch of beautiful pieces in there. Anything that is not having belonged to the family is period, and it did come locally. It did come from the Cape Fear area, so we try to keep everything as close as possible. There's a painting on the 2nd floor that Henry Latimer did, and it was dated 1918, and it's a picture of the dram tree. And most people in Wilmington have heard of the dram tree, but they don't know the story behind it. And I love to tell the story. The story of the dram tree is that it's 28 miles from the sea to the port of Wilmington, and that tree stood out as a 2-mile marker for sailors. And unfortunately, I believe in the 1940s, it was taken out when they were dredging the river by accident. I actually even bought one of the prints of that picture, and I have it hanging in my own home. But it's just a beautiful painting, and there's a lot of Henry Latimer's artwork around the house, but that stands out as my absolute favorite just because it adds a unique quality to the Latimers and their connection to Wilmington. The house is not just a museum, it's also the headquarters of the Historical Society of the Lower Cape Fear. And the archives are pretty vast as far as what you want to find. You can come in there and you can find out family history belonging to families that have lived in the area going as far back as the 1700s. Carol, our archivist, is wonderful, and she's always willing to help and readily available. We actually have home tours Monday through Saturday. On Saturdays, we have a walking tour. We have a few volunteers that volunteer their Saturday morning at 10 o'clock to take you all around Wilmington and show you not just the Latimer House, but some of the other places in Wilmington as well. We also have a candlelight tour that happens the first weekend every December. We have the Secret Garden Tour, which is a huge event for us as well in September. The house is always looking for volunteers to docent, volunteers for giving tours, or for helping out with some of these events. I myself started out as just a person taking the tour because I was interested in the house, and I did, and I fell in love with the house. And the people there were so welcoming, and they started training me on all the history. Everything that I know about the house has come from these wonderful people. With a 163-year-old house, there are always repairs going on, and a lot of our funding comes from the programs that we put on, as well as the tours that we give. So we have a priority list. Recently, we've been repairing some of the plasterwork on the outside of the house. A couple of years ago, we had a new roof put on. We actually recently redid one of the rooms in the upstairs section of the house where the governess's room is set up now. Part of the beauty of the house is trying to keep it the same as it always was, trying to keep that historic nature to it.
Artwork has always been a huge part of my life, literally since I was born. It's been a part of my life that I've cherished, that I've really appreciated, and it's always been a perfect outlet for me to get my emotions, get my thoughts across. I started Harvard in the fall of 2010. I really expected that I'd be doing artwork. Strangely enough, I picked up statistics. One of those interesting things about it has been that I've really seen a lot of creative applications in statistics that I didn't really expect would be there. But one of the more interesting parts of my experience has been joining the Harvard Polo team. And I created 2 artworks. One was Harvard Polo and the other one was called Myopia Polo, named after the field that the team plays on regularly, which is around 45 minutes north of Cambridge. They auctioned them off and they benefited the Harvard Polo team. A very large part of my artworks go toward charity. And the reason is because I think it's very important to help the community. And the reason being is I've grown up in Wilmington, North Carolina. I've grown up and I've really been to a lot of different places in the United States and abroad. And I've gotten a chance, I think, to witness how communities develop, how communities grow, how the arts centers, how other types of community organizations really strike this type of life into a community and really give it this room and this space to really expand itself. The way I've really always shown my artwork is very relationship based. And the reason is because if somebody sees my work, they almost always want to hear the story behind it. And who's better at telling the story than the person that created it? Regardless of how social media has really shifted the climate in terms of how companies, how galleries advertise, it definitely has. I think that there's this strong base of personal relationships and really that artist to art appreciator connection that hasn't been moved by social media, and I don't expect it to be. My artwork is really something that I come back to. It's some place where I can release my emotions, where I can really get things, my thoughts on a page, and that's always been that way, and it always will continue to be that way.
Around here, we work hard for you. We get started before the sun comes up and work well into the night. We use only the freshest ingredients for our food and our craft beers. At Front Street Brewery, we're passionate about our work and what we serve. For nearly 20 years, we've been proud to call Wilmington home. So from our family to yours, thanks for coming in. Front Street Brewery, serving you since 1995.
She was once considered the world's greatest sea weapon and went on to become one of the most highly decorated American battleships of World War II. Now moored in downtown Wilmington, she's one of the most highly decorated family attractions in North Carolina, serving a new generation as an exciting, hands-on historical adventure. Have a blast exploring the past aboard the Battleship North Carolina. Adventure calls.
The most talked about travel experience is a river cruise. We work with top name operators. There is no better way to see the world than on a river cruise from Four Seasons Travel and spend less time getting there and more time being there.
Bring your home movies into Carolina Video Edit Centers for professional high-quality transfer. From old-school VHS to the latest digital cameras, we can transfer to disk, hard drive, or upload directly. Whether it's digital archiving or social media sharing, we can do it at Carolina Video Edit Centers.
Alpha Mortgage. We're the only full-service mortgage banking firm in southeastern North Carolina. From origination through processing, underwriting, funding, closing, we do it all locally. More than 90 professional staff right here in Wilmington. Alpha Mortgage is the leading mortgage lender in southeastern North Carolina. Alpha Mortgage is the lender more real estate agents and builders rely on. We work with your realtor and your builder every step of the way from application to closing. We have the best rates, best service because we are Alpha. Alpha Mortgage.
I've had the great pleasure of knowing by telephone and by letters Pembroke Jones's granddaughter. And over the years, especially after the book came out in 2001, I've learned many other things. Mrs. Jones, of course, had the house. And she had had that house, like we said, from 1884 on, and it went through many transformations, and it became 39 rooms at one point. So Mr. Jones had enough, I think, of maybe the cultivation and all the cultivated flowers there too, maybe because he purchased that land through his cousin, Thomas Wright, and they kept adding and adding and adding till they had 2,200 acres. But there was never, that we know of, one cultivated blossom at that part of the Jones estate. And they were hers and his. That was all his. Pembroke Jones was going to use sort of a Sears and Roebuck catalog house as a hunting lodge. And his friend, Henry Walters, said no and got J. Stuart Barney, a great architect, to design the Italianate sort of palace that was there. The lodge was used for parties occasionally, but the lodge was mostly a guy's place. It was where they hung out, and because Mr. Walters was in charge of that place, we don't know hardly anything about who went there. We know a movie was filmed there, that movie people stayed there, that Caruso was scheduled to go there, that various high-ranking Italian officials visited there rather often. But there's not much else we know because Henry Walters was one of the quietest, most reticent people ever. And Mrs. Jones and Mr. Jones being extroverts and very natural, there were people that served fried chicken in Newport. The Joneses at Airlie were not that way. If she gave a big party, she would call her friend Louis T. Moore, the great historian and the Chamber of Commerce director, and say, hey, guess what? My friend Willie Vanderbilt is coming to town. Will you go meet Willie at the dock in Southport, because his yacht couldn't come into Wilmington, it was so big, and bring him through town and bring him down here. Well, knowing that Mr. Moore was going to call the Star News and Mr. Moore was going to tell them it was coming. So we do have a record, a spotty record of who came to Airlie. But anyway, the lodge was a much more secret place. It was done in dark walnut, and it had secret doors that you would touch something and all of a sudden the bookcase turns around and you're walking into a lavish bedroom. Or there was a secret passageway from the water, the sound, that came all the way up into the house because of Prohibition and all those things that were going on, and that's how they got the liquor in the house. They didn't have oyster roast at night. They had oyster roast in the daytime. And it was very simple. They had Johnny cakes, they had oysters, and they had usually like a lemon tart or something citrus, and that's what it was. The Temple of Love, of course, used to have 4 ponds. It had a great giant circle around it, and there were 4 ponds like pieces of a pie. And they had live fish in there so that the guests could go, and the poor fish captive, but they could go and they could catch a fish for their dinner, and that sort of thing. And it was just a beautiful spot. It was designed by John Russell Pope, who married the Joneses' daughter, Sadie. The most famous party at Landfall was the tree party. And they took the live oaks that at that time there were so many, and they just would follow, the ground, sometimes seeking sun. And they took those, and with the help of Julius Evans, Mitty Evans' husband, and several other people, they built platforms, and they had violinists, they had an orchestra up in the platforms in the trees, and all the guests went up nicely situated ladders that were made that they would not stumble, and they had all their meal and their dessert and their drinks in the trees, which is kind of neat. And a lot of people think that happened at Airlie, but it did not. It happened at Landfall.
Now, John Newland Maffitt, he was the most famous raider in the Civil War, as well as blockade runners. And in 8 months, he captured 23 ships. One of the funny stories related to Wilmington was when Fort Fisher had fallen. By one day, he was actually coming in to load off supplies for Petersburg. Well, it turned out that the Navy knew he was coming. Because he charted the Cape Fear River, he knew how to get in and out. The Cape Fear River is the most dangerous river because of the frying pan shoals and very shallow areas or sandbars. So that's how he used to get in. The North didn't know where they were. Now, the chart was done in 1853. NOAA holds all the charts for Captain John Newland Maffitt. What I did was I copied the original. Then I had a very dear friend, his name is David, at the FedEx, but David has computer enhanced it and brought it back to life to what it looks like right now. In the Riverboat Landing restaurant, there is a copy. It comes in the 16 by 20 for framing. Because he charted the Cape Fear River in 1853, he managed to get in. Then he had to wait 5 minutes before his second hand went home and checked on his wife and came back. So it was about a 30-minute stay. Not only did he get in, he even got back out. He was the only raider never to be caught.
Your passport awaits to 3 of Wilmington's most historic homes. Now, for one low admission price, you can visit historic Bellamy Mansion, the city's grandest antebellum home, the Burgwin Wright House Museum and Gardens, beautifully restored for a step back in history, and Latimer House, representing opulent life in Wilmington before the Civil War. Purchase your passports at any one of the historic home locations and discover 3 great reasons to visit Wilmington's past. Tickets are good for 1 week from the date of purchase.
Do you like historic neighborhoods, architecture, and local history? Then you don't want to miss Historic Wilmington Foundation's guided architectural walking tours. The Forest Hills Tour showcases the city's first automobile neighborhood, and the Streetcar Suburbs Tour highlights Wilmington's first suburbs, Carolina Place and Carolina Heights. And this summer, on select Saturdays, a new downtown tour. Tours have a strong architectural focus and are led by knowledgeable guides. Check our website for details.
Ironclad Brewery joins the growing list of Wilmington-based craft breweries in a renovated historic building on 2nd Street, where the interior has been restored using original wood from the building. And the craft beers, they're all local and regional to Wilmington and North Carolina. Now pouring Fishtail Pale Ale, and a favorite for dark beer lovers, White Squall, Ironclad's White Chocolate Brown Ale. Downstairs or up in the high-gravity lounge area, come and enjoy craft beer at its best. Ironclad Brewery, 2nd Street in historic downtown Wilmington.
Well, the Battleship North Carolina is undertaking the Generations campaign to protect the ship for the next 40 years and the mission as the state's memorial. The Battleship North Carolina, just as any memorial and any great artifact, needs maintenance. And the Navy's standard is that the donated ships will undergo either a dry docking or some kind of major level of repair every 20 years. The Battleship North Carolina has not seen such kind of repair since 1953. So it's time. We have developed a technical solution to the repairs. We conducted a $2 million experiment on the starboard bow to make sure technologies, techniques, availability of World War II vintage steel with the appropriate carbon content, etc., was available. We're ready to execute, and we have the Generations campaign to fully fund the project. And what our goal is to bring the citizens, since this is the people's battleship, into the solution for the next generation. Well, the Battleship North Carolina is the epitome of a public-private partnership. Our solution will involve construction of a cofferdam, which is just essentially a steel wall around the ship where we can pump the water out. That will be jointly funded by the state of North Carolina, who's providing half funding. Large corporations have already stepped up to the plate. And now, during the Generations campaign public phase, we're going to individuals who may remember that nickels and dimes campaign from the 50s and 60s. The State Employees Credit Union, great donors in our state of North Carolina, have given us an additional $3 million to build a SECU Memorial Walkway, which will be dedicated to the veterans who served and died World War II, as well as all veterans who've served since. The battleship's plans were already in design and engineering, but as well we have our CAMA environmental permits already in hand, because not only do we want to take care of our message to the memorial, but we also recognize we must be good stewards to the environment. Our goal is to build an expedition trail through the marsh for environmental education. And as well, we're going to rebuild our docks. We will have kayak launches. We will have other dock spaces so that our visitors can have an expanded visit and take trips up the river or commute back and forth between the battleship and the city of Wilmington. Most people don't know that the Battleship North Carolina was originally chartered and continues to operate this day as an enterprise of the state. There's only a couple formal enterprises within the state's authority. And an enterprise means that in statute, it's defined that we can receive no state funding for operations. Our job is to maintain the ship. But for capital projects, we can go to the state. Those periodic needs are part of our regimen. So when a visitor visits the Battleship North Carolina, buys a ticket, buys goods in our store, participates in a special program, they continue to contribute to that operations funding, which helps keep the battleship healthy day to day. Many people think of the Battleship North Carolina as just a warship or a piece of armament. But the Battleship North Carolina and its mission is really about the 10,000 North Carolinians who gave their lives during World War II, as well as a symbol of service by all veterans since. So yes, the prime artifact is the Battleship North Carolina, but the message and our mission is to remember those who gave so much.
As its 50th anniversary gift to the City of Wilmington, the Wilmington Rotary Club in 1965 built what is, as far as I know, the world's largest rotary wheel symbol at Greenfield Park. There's a coalition now of local Rotary clubs, all 6 of the Rotary clubs in Wilmington, that has joined together to maintain that park, to improve it. We have found that in addition to being a nice amenity to the park, it's also helped as an economic and community development asset to the surrounding neighborhood. So that's a real asset to the city, and it's right next to the amphitheater at Greenfield Park, which was also a Rotary Club project in the early 1960s. It's interesting to note that in 1965, those walls were built by masonry students at Williston High School, so we love that connection with our legacy project. As we saw our centennial coming up, a number of people thought that we really needed to develop what we called a legacy project, something which would be a long-term gift to the community. And we made the decision to adopt Williston Middle School. This is a school that has a long history. It actually originated as a Freedmen's Bureau school for freed slaves in 1865. And for many years, Williston was the high school for African Americans during the segregation era. It does not have the resources that some other schools do. So we have been helping Williston Middle School. We provided a grant about a year ago that allowed their library to buy hundreds of ebooks, which the students can download and read, which enhances the literacy objective that we and the school share.
Discover more to do and see in Wilmington. See the attractions, events, businesses, and people that make this a great place to live. Keep your eyes on us as we keep our eye on Wilmington. On CBS 10 WILM.
Hi, I'm Dave Baker. I'm the Wrightsville Beach Ocean Rescue Director, and I'd like to tell you a few things on how you can have an enjoyable and safe time while you're at the beach. As you can see, we have a beautiful pier behind us, and we'd like you to enjoy it. However, please do not swim next to the pier or enter the water. We have strong and dangerous rip currents. We have a red pole up. Please stay south of that red pole. And if you're on the north side of the pier, please stay north of the red pole for that pier. They're approximately 500 feet. Please understand that rip currents are strong and dangerous jets of water pulling you away from shore. And next to the pier, they're exceptionally dangerous. They can pull you into the pier and you could become cut up. So listen to the lifeguards. If they whistle at you, please move and understand this is for your safety. A lot of you are going to bring down watercraft when you come to the beach to play. And this is quite all right. Just remember that you stay within the limitations of your abilities should the surf conditions come up and what your boat and or jet ski is made to do. However, we do have a rule that you must maintain a distance of 600 feet offshore and just use Johnny Mercer's Pier for an indicator of how far you need to stay offshore. Anything closer endangers the individuals on the beach. You cannot beach your watercraft, as in a jet ski, to pick up personnel and or to drop off personnel that far off and allow them to swim in. Remember, this can cause a dangerous situation. The swimmer may not be able to judge distance and it could be beyond his limitations. So please, keep your vessels 600 feet offshore, have an enjoyable day, and enjoy the view from the ocean back at Wrightsville Beach.